On today's show, we'll be breaking down the final rankings from NHL Central Scouting as we get a clearer picture of what might happen at the 2025 NHL Draft.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USHL scout at Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we're delving into some draft rankings from NHL Central Scouting, which really have shed some light on what might happen come draft day, of some trends that we're seeing that may well also be indicative of shifts occurring in the valuation of these players amongst NHL scouts. So in the first segment, we'll be looking at the top names both in North America and Europe. Then in the second, we're going to be breaking down the overall top 2 rounds of North American talents. This is also, of course, the region that I'm more familiar with my work this season. And finally, we're going to highlight some interesting late round gems that could be available in the mid to late rounds and have some decent amount of upside in their games. So that's the outlook here for today's show. And without further ado, let's just jump straight into these rankings. And we'll kick things off here by looking at the top 15 on the North American side, because this is a very North American heavy draft class. You're going to see a lot of NA-based players being drafted in the top round. There aren't going to be all that many players playing in Europe who are going to be top 32 picks. You have maybe 3 or 4, but that's probably the extent of it. Like Victor Eklund and Anton Frondell from Djurgården are the 2 slam dunk first round caliber players from Europe this season. And beyond them, you have a bunch of players that could push for the late first, but may also drop into the second round. So let's focus here at the upper end at number 1 in North America, Matthew Schaefer from the Erie Otters. He's been number 1 all season long. No surprise here at all that he's staying here. And even though he's only played in 17 games this season, he had 7 goals and 22 points in the OHL there, and was the best player on the ice when he was playing at the World Junior Championships before he got injured, which ended his season prematurely as well. Overall, a very projectable player to have a really big impact on a top pairing in the NHL in all 3 zones. He's so mobile, so interesting. Clearly the first overall talent here for NHL Central Scouting. At 2 and 3, you have kind of similar to what we're seeing in a lot of boards recently. You have Michael Misa and James Hagens really being the top 2 forwards. At Elite Prospects, we have Porter Martone as the second top forward behind Michael Misa, but it's been pretty tight between Martone and Hagens here this season. So Michael Misa with 134 points in 65 games, just such a projectable top 6 NHL centerman. He's going to play minutes. He's going to be playing for a very long time. And he also has a level of goal scoring acumen, overall intelligence in the offensive zone, and a level of dynamic skill on puck that he's added to his game that just wasn't really there in the previous 2 OHL seasons that he's played. A lot to like with how he's like trending in his development. It's really going upwards, and he's so projectable. There's a lot to like. I think that if he falls to like 3rd overall, a team's going to be sprinting to the podium to pick him up. James Hagens, of course, brings the dynamism and the skating ability off the rush, and Jake O'Brien and Radi Murtka round out the top 5. So you get another skilled playmaking center there with Jake O'Brien at number 4, and a big, heavy right shot defenseman who skates like the wind at 5th overall. I think Radi Murtka is a very clear top 10 guy this year in terms of where he's actually going to go on draft day, and the more I've seen, the more I'm on board with that too. He's so projectable. He might end up as a top pairing guy, but it would be more as like an insulator type for a more dynamic player on the left side. But still, I think a player that who has this like type of likelihood of top 4 upside with the defensive habits, the offensive runway, the creativity he's been able to show in flashes as well. Just a very intriguing profile here at number 5 in North America for Radi Murtka. At 6th, we finally come to Porter Martone, who falls here for Central Scouting. The big right winger is so creative and a very, very dangerous scorer, both in terms of his playmaking and his shot at the OHL level. 37 goals and 98 points this season in 57 games. And still, he's falling down this board. And I think a lot of the question marks with Martone have to do around his consistent ability to attack with pace, and pace being something that still has been lacking in his game at times. At 7th overall, we have another responsible two-way centerman in Caleb Desnoyers. The left shot center from the Moncton Wildcats in the QMJHL has just been dominant in terms of scoring in the regular season and the playoffs for Moncton, just leading a dominant team in scoring by a wide margin. And he does it by just having a bunch of pro-level habits. I think a top 10 valuation is more than fair, and especially in a class like this one where there aren't that many like centers who are so projectable to play middle 6 minutes that are available in the first round beyond the top 10, the top 13 range. I think that Desnoyers' stock is only going to rise because of that. At 8th and 9th, we have two big players. We have Roger McQueen of the Brandon Wheat Kings and Kayshawn Aitchison of the Barrie Colts. So really big rise here for Aitchison into the top 10 of North American skaters, and I fully see it. I mean, he's so violent and has a wicked, wicked shot from the blue line. I mean, as a blue liner this season, like 26 goals, 59 points. The production's been really impressive alongside all the violence he brings on the defensive side of the game. And I think that teams are going to look at that and just see a player who's going to step things up come playoff time and who can really, really ramp up that intensity and that just aggression in his game. At number 10, we have Carter Bear, really dynamic playmaker, very hardworking player, as we've been talking about all year. But that lacerated Achilles is an injury that could make him fall on draft day. At 11th, Brady Martin, another two-way center who works hard, but has a lot of creativity on puck, tries a lot of things. Not everything was working for him this season, but he had the leash to just try things with the puck on his stick, which really allowed his offensive game to blossom in some intriguing ways. And I think he's quite clearly been a top 20 player here this season. And the production in Sault Ste. Marie has been very, very good. I mean, 33 goals and 72 points in 57 games is nothing to scoff at. Then we have a pair of blue liners at 12 and 13 with Logan Hensler from the University of Wisconsin and Jackson Smith from the Tri-City Americans in the WHL. Two very smooth skaters with decent physical foundations as well. Logan Hensler has really been leveraging his high-end mobility in all three zones this season, especially as the year has progressed. A player with a lot of potential, I think, in terms of the two-way puck-moving game. I don't think that the offensive activations or the offensive playmaking is necessarily dynamic or super high-end in terms of projecting as like the offensive driver on a top pairing at the end of the day, but he could maybe fulfill that role on a second pair as a bit more of a connective style. And this season playing it in Wisconsin is not the ideal environment either for blue liners to learn activation habits. So overall, I think a player that has some intriguing offensive runway and is already very refined in how he uses his physicality and his mobility to just neutralize plays off the rush. Jackson Smith might be an even better skater than Hensler, but he's a left shot defenseman. He brings some more physicality, a bit more refinement, I think, in the dynamic influences in activating offensively. And overall, a player I think I would take a swing on a little bit earlier than Hensler because he's just a little bit more dynamic. He's a bit more physical. He's a bit of a better skater. All the tools are a bit higher end, but he's a left shot. So you might see Hensler go higher on draft day as a result of that as well. And to wrap things up here for North America in the top 15, we have Lyndon Lakovich, a dynamic, skillful, big winger who still has to add some more power to his game at 14th overall. And Jack Nesbitt, a 6'4", two-way center who plays with physicality, was a point-a-game scorer in Windsor this season, 25 goals and 64 points in 65 games. And at 185 pounds, he still has a lot of his frame to fill out in, and the physicality is only going to grow with time. But to do a little quick fire here of the top 15 in Europe, I haven't even watched all of these players just yet, which I also think goes to show how weak of a class it is on the European side this year, that there's multiple players in here that aren't really logged as like top 3 round potential picks for us at Elite Prospects. But at number 1 and 2, of course, we have Anton Frondell and Victor Eklund, the two Swedes leading the charge among European-based prospects this season, playing in Hockey Allsvenskan. Frondell really came into his own since making that jump in December or January. 11 goals and 25 points in 29 professional games. And Eklund was there all season long with 19 goals and 31 points in 42 games. I think Eklund has a bit of an easier path to being a middle six NHLer than Frondell in terms of how long it's going to take him. And I also think that he has a bit more of that offensive upside. But with Frondell, what you're swinging on is a combination of physical maturity, strong defensive habits, and an absolute howitzer of a shot. Probably the best in this year's draft class. So you have a special offensive tool to build around, but he's not dynamic in transition. He's quite inactive in transition as a whole. He really relies on more dynamic wingers to do the puck carrying for him off the rush. But as an off puck player, I think he's a really intriguing guy. And if he falls to like 7th, 8th, 9th overall, I think a team would be very wise to snap him up. But at number 3, we have Milton Yestrin, another very intense player who's been playing a lot of pro hockey this season, but also did very well at the junior level in J20 with Moto. Just constantly working, and overall, I think a player who plays with pace, is inside driven, and is projectable for a bottom 6 role in the NHL someday. Wojciech Chihar is the next one on the list here, playing Czech pro hockey, followed by Alexander Zhuravsky from the MHL in Russia, probably the best puck handler among all European prospects this season, and Eddie Genborg, a big physical north-south player playing with Linköping in Sweden and playing in the SHL there this season with 2 goals in 28 games so far this season. Eric Nielsen's another intelligent two-way player playing in Swedish hockey this campaign. 12 goals, 38 points in 37 junior games, and overall player who just leads with his brain. I think it is a projectable like 3rd round candidate to maybe be a bottom 6 center down the road. And Jacob East Wozniak is really falling down the list here at number 8 among European players, even though he scored 23 goals and 57 points in 40 games this season at the J20 level, while bringing a lot of value on the defensive side of things, being a really active off-puck player. His stick is very disruptive. He's been quite physical defensively as well, and just a pain to play against at that level. Still a guy who's been falling down boards, and might be actually a guy who's being overcorrected a bit in terms of where he's being ranked, because the offensive skill, the scoring habits, the actual puck skill quality are really quite impressive. And when you add that with that strong defensive foundation, I do think that this is a player who's worth a pick in the top 64, even though he might not end up there on draft day. At number 9, Kurban Limatov is a 6'3" left shot defenseman out of Russia who's a good skater and could be a decent projection for a number 4 role down the road. Theodor Hallqvist is a right shot defenseman out of Sweden at 6'2", 172 pounds. Another smooth skater, moves well, could progress as well in his development. And here, just a quick fire for the last names here to wrap up the top 15 on the European side. We have Artem Gonchar, a left shot defenseman out of the Russian junior circuit. Lasse Boelius, a left shot defenseman from the Finnish junior league. Theos Doxelius, a left shot centerman from the J20 who scored 22 goals and 51 points in 40 games this season. Tomasz Politin is a projectable 6'1", 200-pound checking winger playing pro hockey with Pelicans in Finland this season. And lastly, we have Matus Jan Kucharczyk out of the Czech junior circuit, who had 6 goals and 16 points in 25 games. So that wraps up this first segment. Those are the players that are kind of on the outlook here in the top 15 skaters for both North America and Europe. In the next one, we're going to be looking at some interesting storylines through the second round and the first round of the North American board. And in the final one, we'll be looking at just some gems, some late round gems, some overage talents, and players I think should go higher on draft day than where Central Scouting has them. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. From 3-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, let's keep this episode rolling, looking at some intriguing storylines through the 16 to 64 range among North American skaters here on NHL Central Scouting's board. The lists are going to be linked down below in the description, of course, so if you want to follow along, look at them, they are going to be there for your convenience. And let's kick things off by talking about Henry Brzustewicz from the London Knights, who's jumped all the way up to 19th overall here on Central Scouting's North American board. He's almost 6'2", 203 pounds as a right shot defenseman playing depth minutes, but still 42 points in 67 games this season. The production's been impressive, and he brings a high level of mobility, good gap control off the rush, and overall a very projectable frame to the NHL level while playing on a dominant London team this season. So his opportunities have been more limited as a result of that. And he's definitely a guy who could take over the reins next season if and when Sam Dickinson makes the jump to pro hockey. But next we have Cullen Potter of Arizona State University, who falls at 22nd overall, a 5'10", 172-pound left shot center. He's undersized, but his pace, the skating ability, the dynamic skill at speed has been really impressive at the college level. And he's gotten 13 goals and 22 points in 35 games as a freshman as a result. And for an undersized player who was expected to take his entire draft year campaign with the NTDP and making that jump to college hockey a year earlier than expected and doing so well, very impressive stuff there for Cullen Potter, who I think with that dynamic skill is going to get some interesting looks from NHL teams looking to add some dynamism in the later half of the first round. Moving on at number 24, we have another player who made the jump to college hockey this season, and that's William Horcoff, who actually made that leap halfway through the season. He's a 6'5", 190-pound center/left wing. He can play across the forward line and is a very intelligent guy. He's just constantly making quick reads off the board to get the puck to the middle of the ice. He doesn't need much time on puck. He just needs to get a little touch on the puck to redirect it into the path of a teammate. He's a very deft player, I think, in terms of his puck touches and the efficiency of them. And overall, the skill level here could still take a step in the coming seasons as he grows further into his frame and gets used to the NCAA pace. And I'll be curious to see how he looks at the U18 World Championships as he's going back to playing with the NTDP group after making that jump to college hockey back in November or December. So returning to the team that he played with to begin the season. At 27th overall, we have Mason West from Edina High School in Minnesota. This is a dual sport athlete. He's 6'5", 0.75. So he's a 6'6", 215-pound right shot forward. He can play at center. He can play on the wing. And he's also the starting quarterback for Edina High School, and he put up ridiculous numbers as the quarterback for the school this season. 37 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, I believe, was his ratio. Getting a lot of looks from colleges, has gotten a couple offers, scholarship offers from D1 colleges to play football as well as hockey. So he has to choose between the two sports now in the next month or so. So we're going to see what he does, but if he does stick with hockey, he could very easily go in the first round on draft day. He's big and a wonderful skater. The fluidity with which he moves is truly exceptional. And he adds to that a very middle-driven, hard-working style of play. He's constantly driving the middle lane. He's dragging players with him. And while contact initiation habits are still really a work in progress, like the physical game inside contact definitely still has a lot of growing room because, again, he was mainly playing high school hockey this season, but did make the leap to play with Fargo in the USHL later on in the campaign and looked very good in those games, just under a point a game in about 12 regular season and playoff combined appearances. So Mason West is definitely a player to keep your eye on. And I think with a level of skill and also vision, the fact that he's a quarterback shines through in how he thinks the game of hockey, how he scans the ice, the awareness of the positioning of his teammates and opponents alike. Very quarterback-like. I think there's a lot of stuff here with this player that teams are going to adore. And just the cherry on top, he's an August 3rd, 07 birthday, so very young for the class. And we'll see where he ends up in terms of college programs, but fingers crossed that ends up being in hockey. At 28th, the next pick, we have Ryker Lee, just a dangerous offensive talent. He's constantly a threat to score, and overall, a guy that has an abundant amount of skill at forward in the USHL. He was the top scoring draft eligible this season in the league, having scored 68 points, including 31 goals in 58 games. And even though he's just 6 feet, 170 pounds, he's quite sturdy on his feet. I wouldn't be too worried in terms of resisting physical contact, but the skating needs some real work. Moving on into the second round, a couple names I wanted to give shout outs to. We have Max Psenicka out of the Portland Winterhawks in the WHL, a 6'5" right shot Czech defenseman. Still only 177 pounds, a lot of his frame left to fill out in, but he's a great skater, plays with physical contact as well, and really adapted nicely to the WHL style after he made his transition halfway through the campaign after starting the year playing Czech pro hockey. And he's going to have a very big stage to show off his abilities at the U18 World Championships as perhaps one of the more intriguing draft talents on the blue line at that tournament for Team Czechia. Moving on, we have Benjamin Kevan falling at 55th overall here among North American skaters for Central Scouting. I think this is very low for this player. He's 6'1.5", 173-pound right shot right winger who's just playing with incessant pace. He's constantly moving his feet, and he's a very skilled puck handler. The actual ability to manipulate defenders at this level with pace shifts, integrating delays into his rushes, and just finding creative solutions to the problems he encounters. He's one of the more projectable skill guys in the USHL this season, in my view, and overall a guy I would swing on in the first round, let alone late in the second like he's listed here. But if he's available in this range of the draft, I think NHL teams should really think long and hard about passing on him through this latter half of the second round, because the potential upside here is top 6 caliber. It is top of the line, very intriguing stuff. But at 59th overall, named Teddy Mutryn from the Chicago Steel in the USHL, a right shot center standing at 6'1", at 204 pounds. He's a goal scoring checking player, might project best as a winger at the NHL level, but his work rate, his physicality, his direct north-south pace, all things that I think are going to adapt very well to the professional level. He still has to work on his scanning, on the playmaking, on finding and linking play between teammates rather than just trying to charge up the ice on his own. But these things will come with time, and I think that there's a foundation here for a really interesting bottom 6 checking forward. But that wraps things up here for the second segment. In the final one, we're going to wrap up the show with a couple potential late round gems and overage talents that you should keep an eye on. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 2025 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed, as easily as you stream your favorite TV shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Play high-quality Xbox games at a fraction of the cost of a console. If you already have a console, a Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take your or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Head to Amazon.com/FireTV to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Generation. Alrighty, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment by presenting some potential late round gems, including some overage talents who are re-entries but have really taken big steps in their developments here this season. And the first one is the one I talked about in the last segment, which was Benjamin Kevan. I think if he's available in the third round of the draft, that is a third round steal right there. But moving on, we have a couple more players that are going to be available way later in the draft, potentially. Kicking it off with Everett Baldwin, ranked at 118th here among North American skaters on NHL Central Scouting's board. I think he's a player that has some real boom potential. He played most of the season in the prep school circuit, finishing off the campaign with the NTDP, playing against some USHL competition and looking really good while making that jump. He's 6 feet, not the biggest guy in the world, but a wonderful skater. True, like 7+ grade skating, like the fluidity, the agility, the edge work, the power, the stride mechanics are all really quite refined with this player. And he adds a lot of aggression in his activation. He's constantly trying to move up ice, but he has that mobility to make up ground and make his way back defensively to get back into position before an odd man rush can really do any big damage. He has that benefit as well in his game. And on top of that, I've really been quite impressed with the defensive habits, the intensity, and overall the strength on his feet. He's not the biggest guy, but he's very physical in holding his ground, especially when trying to box out opponents around the slot. He really made it difficult for opponents to get into the slot, trying to disrupt the goaltender's sightlines. And overall, I think that he's a player that has a lot of runway in terms of the physical development still, but the offensive activations too, and a guy who's so raw but has a foundation of these habits that I think will help him a lot in terms of progressing to the pro levels a lot more comfortably than other players in this age group. This is a very, very exciting player that I have quite clearly as a top 50 talent on my board. And if he's available in the 4th or 5th or 6th round of the draft, oh boy, that is a home run potential swing right there. Sticking with the NTDP, LJ Mooney is another option there. He's ranked at 206th, one of the last players ranked here by Central Scouting. And I can see why there is some hesitation with this player. He's 5'7". He's very pacey. He's constantly moving his feet. Very, very high motor kind of player who at his best has these really dynamic flashes of playmaking, attacking downhill at pace, incisively into the offensive zone, up the jugular. But the overall consistency in getting pucks to the middle and there being a level of control with those plays has been a work in progress for Mooney this season. He's still a player who hits and hopes very, very often with his offensive implications, but the pace is something that can be worked on. But again, with that frame, he's going to fall on draft day. He might not be drafted on draft day, but I'd personally be willing to take a swing on him in the later rounds, in the 5th, 6th, or 7th round, because the skill, the playmaking ability at his brightest is quite strong. And I think that with more consistency in his checking habits and overall refining his 3-zone game, he could turn into a bottom 6 spark plug who adds some real playmaking pop to the equation from a depth position and also potentially from a second power play unit down the road. And the only unranked player I wanted to give a shout out to here today from the USHL is Danny Klaers from the Muskegon Lumberjacks. He's a mobile right shot defenseman, quite physically involved, but still has a lot of physical runway in terms of filling out his frame and adding more weight, especially to his lower body. But he's a strong skater, explosive lower body in terms of closing his lateral gaps very, very quickly. He's a guy I think has some real upside as a transition defender who moves the puck up the ice with pace and purpose and could be a bit of a play connector on a third pairing in the NHL someday. But he likely won't get drafted this year, but he's a guy I'm keeping my eye on to really make some ripples once he hits the NCAA level next season. But now to wrap things up, I wanted to highlight 2 overagers who are playing in the USA this season, one in college hockey and one in the USHL, who really have earned some draft picks in the middle rounds of the draft. Charlie Cerrato, in his freshman season playing with Penn State in the Big Ten, had 42 points in 38 games as a freshman forward. Really impressive jump in competition there and bringing that quality and that production to that level. And Aidan Park is the player I wanted to shout out here for the USHL, and he's a very, very fun player. He's a D+1, whereas Cerrato's a D+2, so only a year off of being draft eligible, and was playing almost entirely in the prep school circuit with Shattuck St. Mary's last season. And he just came into his own with the Green Bay Gamblers this campaign as a two-way, hardworking center, constantly moving his feet, but just a very, very pro-style brain in terms of the pace at which he makes his decisions, in terms of varying his angles and speeds of attack. He's a very adaptable offensive player who's brought a lot of defensive value on top of that. And I think that him moving over to the WHL to join the Calgary Hitmen for their playoff run here late in the campaign is a really interesting move as he's off to college next season, as he's a University of Michigan commit, which I think is a great landing spot for him. especially considering that the skating still needs a little bit of fine tuning, and that's a great program to work on that. But that wraps things up here for this episode, breaking down some storylines from the Central Scouting rankings. Of course, I couldn't break down the entirety of the rankings because there are hundreds of players listed, but they're linked down below in the description if you want to browse through them, see where the players have landed, and overall see which players are up for the draft as a whole here this season, because these lists are very comprehensive. You might see 1 to 5 players who are not included on these rankings who get drafted come June. There aren't going to be many of them. Like, this covers really every single player who is being considered by NHL teams, with very, very few exceptions. So it's a very, very interesting resource to kind of learn from in that sense, but also as an indicator in terms of what might happen on draft day. So some of these trends in terms of Poor Martone falling and seeing Michael Misa being like the top forward among draft eligibles, these are trends I think can really be tracked and traced all the way through to the NHL draft that are likely going to hold true through then. But that wraps things up here. Thank you so much for tuning in as always. If you're watching on YouTube, please do leave me a comment down below what you thought about this episode, about the rankings as a whole, the Central Scouting rankings, and which players might be some really cool late round gem options on draft day. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. We always appreciate our everydayers here on the pod. And for your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Philip and Steele break down everything you'd possibly want to know to build yourself a sustainable and competitive fantasy roster. But that wraps things up here. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Sebastian High, and I look forward to catching you tuning in again very, very soon.